All right, let's jump right in. You know, it's funny how sometimes the biggest, most powerful lessons about life come from the most unexpected places. In this case, we're looking at a short sermon that unpacks the absolute tiniest book in the New Testament, and it reveals this huge, profound truth about why we really, truly need each other. So the sermon kicks off with this fantastic story. Picture this. There's an elderly man who's pretty much deaf. His family is so used to it, they just talk about him like he's not even in the room. Well, one day he goes out and gets one of these incredible state-of-the-art hearing aids. You can barely even see it. He goes back for a checkup and the doctor says, "So, I bet your family is just thrilled you can hear everything now." The old man gets this little grin on his face and says, "Oh, I haven't told them. I just sit there and listen. I've changed my will 3 times." That story just perfectly sets the stage, doesn't it? Hearing the unvarnished truth can be a real shock, and actually delivering that truth can be, well, incredibly tricky. And that's what brings us to the heart of this explainer. A 2,000-year-old letter from the Apostle Paul, a guy who is facing his own challenge of delivering some seriously uncomfortable news.
Okay, so first things first, let's set the scene for this ancient message. This is not some grand public speech or a theological treatise. Nope. This is an intensely personal note, and what's more, it was written from a prison cell.
The book of Philemon is, well, it's tiny. We're talking just 335 words in the original Greek. Paul wrote it around 60 AD while he was under house arrest in Rome. So he's literally chained to a guard, but he can still write letters and have visitors. And this letter, it really feels less like scripture and more like a private postcard.
Now, let's meet the cast of characters, because this is where all the drama comes from. First, you've got Paul, the author, who calls himself a prisoner. Then there's Philemon, the guy who gets the letter. He's a wealthy leader in the church. And finally, there's Onesimus, who's the whole reason for the letter. He was Philemon's slave, and he ran away. So this whole setup is building towards the central conflict of the letter. Paul is about to ask Philemon to do something that, by any standard of the day, was just completely and totally radical.
So here's the backstory. Onesimus runs away from his master, Philemon. And here's a little bit of irony for you. The name Onesimus literally means useful. But by running away, he'd become, as Paul puts it, useless to his master. But then somehow, while he's on the run in the massive city of Rome, he crosses paths with Paul, and his entire life gets turned upside down.
So this is the heart of the dilemma. Under Roman law, Philemon had every legal right to punish Onesimus severely, maybe even have him killed. But look what Paul does. He's not just sending property back to its owner. No, he's sending a beloved brother back and asking Philemon to welcome him not as a slave, but as an equal. I mean, that is a massive, almost unthinkable request for that time.
Okay, now we get to what the sermon argues is the single most important detail in the entire letter. It's a little thing, but it's a detail that changes absolutely everything. Just look at the address line. Paul doesn't just write to Philemon, he includes Philemon's family and another church leader, Archippus, and then, here's the kicker, and to the church in your house. Wait a second, this wasn't a private one-on-one message, this was meant to be read out loud to the entire community.
And that raises the sermon's huge central question. Why on earth would Paul make such a delicate, sensitive, and personal request a public matter? Why would he drag the whole community into this? Well, the answer is both simple and incredibly profound. Paul knew. He knew that what he was asking Philemon to do, to offer this radical forgiveness, to completely upend a social structure, was just too hard to do alone. Philemon needed the support, the encouragement, and the accountability of his faith community to help him make the right but unbelievably difficult choice. And this one specific situation really opens up a much broader principle that the sermon dives into, the serious danger of trying to live a good, moral, or faithful life in complete isolation. The sermon really contrasts 2 different ways of living. On one hand, you've got the classic Lone Ranger model, this idea that we can and should handle everything ourselves. But then you have the iron sharpens iron model, which says no, we actually need other people. We need their perspectives, their challenges, and their support to help shape us and make us better. The sermon gives this really powerful image of a zebra. When it's with the herd, it's safe. But the moment a zebra wanders off by itself, it becomes an incredibly easy target for a lion. And the point is that spiritually, ethically, we're just as vulnerable when we try to go it alone.
So how do you even know if you're wandering off course? The sermon uses this really great modern analogy to explain exactly why we all need that outside perspective.
Think about your car's alignment. You're driving it every day, you hit a few potholes, and it starts to pull to one side. but it happens so slowly you barely even notice. It feels normal. But then you take it to a mechanic, they put it up on the machine, and the objective data shows your alignment is way off. You couldn't see it yourself, and you definitely can't fix it in your driveway with a wrench. You need an expert with the right tools.
And that really brings us right to a key takeaway from this sermon. Just like with that car, we often have absolutely no idea how misaligned our lives, our attitudes, or our priorities have become. We need an objective standard, and we need people who care about us enough to be the iron that sharpens us.
Now, if you want a dramatic, real-world example of what this kind of community survival looks like, let's talk about the incredible 2002 Quay Creek mine rescue and the story of these 9 miners.
So these 9 men were trapped for 3 days straight, 240 feet underground in a dark shaft that was flooded with freezing 55-degree water. Their biggest enemy was hypothermia. So how did they survive? One of the miners explained it later. He said that whenever one of them started getting dangerously cold and shaking, the other 8 would literally huddle around him, pressing their bodies against his to share their warmth and bring his temperature back up. It wasn't about individual toughness, it was a team effort, pure and simple.
And all of this brings us to the sermon's final, pointed challenge for all of us. Paul put Philemon in a community that could help him do the right thing. The miners survived because they had each other's backs. So the question for us is pretty direct. Who's in our community? Who have we given permission to tell us when our alignment is off? Who is in our huddle when life gets cold? It's a vital question because as this tiny 2,000-year-old letter shows us, the most difficult, most courageous, and most important choices are the ones we simply cannot make alone.